Google search GMATPoint daily targets, click on the first link. Here, you can take short GMAT tests for free in an exam interface. After submitting your test, you can view detailed video solutions. These tests are taken by thousands of students worldwide. Start your preparation by taking these tests today.
Hi friends, welcome to GMATPoint's videos. I'm Sayali Ma'am, and in this video I'll be introducing you to what elements are actually tested in GMAT Reading Comprehension. So basically I'll be covering what are the abilities that you have to develop to crack reading comprehension. So let's get started. So what exactly is tested in your reading comprehension, tests, what skills are essentially needed to do well there? See, basically it does not test your ability to understand technical information or know scientific information that is outside the what is actually given in the passage. Whether you know science very well or deeply would not really make much of a difference to your reading comprehension skills or your reading comprehension ability in the given test. So it's not a test of your technical skills as such. It is your ability to understand what is given even in a non-technical perspective and infer and comprehend what is given. So basically the skills are mostly comprehension skills. These are not skills where you are required to memorize details or to understand technical information. No prior technical background is necessary to answer these kind of questions. So it's basically understanding simple English, understanding topics which you might not have read about before, but if somebody tells you that okay, this is the information, understanding that information even when you do not have a technical background. Again, a background is not necessary, so you should not actually go ahead and assume that okay, if a particular passage is about say an animal or sea life or a particular species in sea life, you need not actually have a degree in marine biology or anything of that sort to understand that particular passage. It would be in plain English, and the skills that would be tested would be that how do you actually deal with information? Can you accept information? Can you process it? Can you make inferences based on the information? And that information can come from a wide variety of sources. No an economics background, a science background, none of that is really necessary to understand what is plain simple English in most cases. So in this case, basically what is being tested is your ability to comprehend information. Remember, as a manager, you will be presented with a lot of information. A lot of data would be coming your way, and your ability to digest that data and produce actionable steps out of it is something that a manager needs to do. It is a skill that a manager should have. So from that perspective, they want to test that can you understand written information, can you understand information on diverse variety of topics, and can you understand what inferences can be made from that. So all of that is basically just testing your plain simple comprehension skills. It is not background specific at all. Now secondly, another skill that is tested is your ability to distinguish between facts versus opinions. This is unfortunately something that a skill that is kind of blurring. The line between facts and opinions seems to be blurring in our real life on social media, but it is extremely important for somebody who is looking for a managerial role to understand what is a fact and what is an opinion. So if, for example, if somebody gives you if somebody says that I believe that we can have a breakthrough in this particular technical development within the month, that is most likely in their opinion. That's not a fact that you can rely on in all cases. As a manager, you should be able to understand and know that. So always there is the ability to say that okay, these are the facts mentioned in the passage and these are the opinions. The opinions even might be expert opinions, but expert opinions are also not facts. So even if you have a passage on sea life and some of the researchers are quoted that saying that this breakthrough might upend all of science, that you can't treat that as a fact, because all discoveries might not be revolutionary. So again, you have to have the ability to distinguish between fact and opinion. Now another ability that is often tested is ability to draw inferences or inferences from information given. Again, as if you remember from my last video on reading comprehension, I had mentioned that it is not much reading comprehension isn't as much about understanding the lines given as it is about reading between the lines. And making inference is all about reading between the lines. If you're given, if the author talks about how terrible something is, they might not actually come out and say that this is a terrible product or this is a terrible idea. They might just highlight all the drawbacks of something without actually explicitly stating that this is something which is not good. So in all of those cases, a person should be able to make inferences just from the context that is given, from what information is given. For example, a lot of at times, without actually saying that something is negative, if you even if you put it in double quotes, you can infer that the author does not believe that something is true. So for example, if you can say that if somebody puts in the talks about a new breakthrough drug and they say effective in double quotes, you can infer, without even knowing the actual explicit beliefs of the author, you can infer that the author doesn't actually think that that particular drug is effective. Otherwise, they would not actually put that in double quotes. So essentially, whenever you see things like that, from your normal comprehension skills, you would be able to infer a lot of things what the author intends to convey but has not explicitly stated it. So that is one of the key aspects of reading comprehension. Understanding or reading between the lines, reading or understanding what is not explicitly conveyed, and this is a very, very important skill to have. Another thing one more thing that you should remember about this is that often fiction will not help you, reading fiction will not help you over here, because most of the time those kind of inferences that you have to draw are explicitly stated in fiction. In fiction does not really test your ability to draw inferences in some cases. Okay, there will be some works of literature which will require you to think, and I'm not saying that all fiction is that way, but most of the time you will not find for example, your regular fiction that you read, popular culture fiction that you read would not require exercising these kind of faculties. So that would basically mean that your normal reading might not actually enable you to do this job, that is of inferencing, drawing inferences from information. But in many cases, like the cult classics or poems, for example, require a lot of drawing inferences from the information given. So this also implies that if you have to actually do well in reading comprehension, you have to have a very diverse source of reading. You should not just read your pop culture books or easy to understand books, but you should have a diverse reading list, some essays from The Economist, some essays from scientific magazines. Basically anything that would require you to think and infer would actually help you build this skill, which would actually help you in your reading comprehension, in GMAT. Now, another skill that is often tested is your ability to understand and critically evaluate the structure of the passage. So basically, once you have read the passage, you should be able to put your critic's hat on and look at the passage with a critical eye. How has the author actually gone about doing this job? You have to also think that the author has a job to do. There's a purpose behind writing the passage, and then you should be able to evaluate how has the author actually gone about doing that. So basically you would say that, okay, the author is trying to convince me that this policy is not good. So then the author will start by putting the context of that particular policy, in what context it is in. Then he will introduce who are the backers of this policy. So he might try to cast aspersion on their motivations, why they are actually putting this policy out in the public domain. Then the author will give the intended negative consequences, drawbacks of the policy, and would conclude with a call to action maybe as to how this policy can be repealed. So if you see, there is a proper behind that purpose. Once the author has decided that I'm going to write this particular essay to convince the reader that this policy is a bad policy, the structure would be such that it would actually achieve that purpose. So the author is guiding you through the passage to change your views. So the author has this job of convincing you, and the structure of the passage would be according to that. So you should also critically think that has the author actually structured the particular passage properly for me to independently arrive at the particular conclusion. So for example, if the author is giving only one part of the picture, I might say that the author is tilted towards one side and he has not presented the full picture. So here you have to have a critical eye, and you should also be cognizant of the motivations of the author. What is the author trying to do through this particular paragraph? So through this particular paragraph, the author is trying to set the context of the discussion. Through this particular paragraph, the author is trying to cast aspersion to the people supporting the policy. So whenever you see that, you can see through a critical eye, a dispassionate eye, what the passage is. Again, remember, the passage is not about knowing what is written or remembering the tiny details of what is given, but you have to understand what is the the subtext of the passage, the motivations behind writing the passage, the overarching message of the passage. That is often much more important than what is actually given in the passage. So in this case, one of the things that is being tested is your ability to evaluate or understand the structure of the passage. So what would be asked is, basically will be asked that based on this, what is the purpose of the third paragraph of the passage? What is the author trying to do by giving this particular example? Why does the author give this counter example, or why does the author give the example of X, Y or Z? So you should be able to understand that what the author is trying to do is basically present the counter argument and then poke holes in the counter argument. So you should be able to see the motivations of the author and how they have shaped the passage as such. Now, the another ability that is often tested is the ability to understand like the logical reasoning parts of it. So if you have your passage components, you should be able to see how the passage components are logically related. So you have your one main idea of the passage, then you have the supporting idea. So the supporting idea might add strength to the overall idea of the passage. A counter example might weaken the idea, or might say that okay, this policy should be thrown out with the following exception, that okay, there are these good parts of the policy, but overall the policy is junk. So whenever you see the passage from a bird's eye view, you will understand what are the how each of the parts of the passage interact, and what is the overall logical reasoning that is employed by the author to actually convince you or guide you in a particular direction. So essentially you have to understand the logical relationships. So logical reasoning, relationship between parts of the passage, all of that you should be able to understand through your critical eye on that particular passage. Now one more thing is that one of the key aspects or the ability that is tested is to actually understand the overarching theme or the purpose of the passage. Now essentially whenever you are given a lot of information, you should be able to distill down that to the basic or the core of the argument. So if you are saying that the author has given you 1,000 reasons to ditch this particular policy, why this particular policy is bad, instead of being bogged down by the 1,000 reasons, you should just focus on the fact that the author is vehemently arguing about against a particular policy from being implemented. So always remember, you have to understand, the first thing that you have to understand is the overarching message of the passage, the main point of the passage. So ability to understand the overarching message or the purpose of the passage is extremely important. And lastly, we'll come back to the evaluative part or the style and tone part that we discussed earlier. You should be able to understand the style and tone of the author. So essentially here you are looking not only what the author has done, but what the author has not done. So you should be able to say the author has presented only the evidence in favor of this particular case. The author has not produced any kind of evidence against the case that he is making. So he is not being completely objective. There will definitely be some arguments against something this as such. If you are given only one side of the picture, the author has not been objective in his analysis. The author has not been balanced in his analysis. He has been subjective and biased towards a particular side. And again, the choice of words would also indicate how the author has actually written the particular passage. Is this something that can stand for a critical analysis of a particular situation? If the author uses extreme words, that is extremely negative or extremely positive words, the minute that balance is lost, the author is no longer an objective and is not no longer objectively viewing the topic, and hence you also have to have that kind of eye on his particular writing, that you should understand that the style and the tone of the passage is not objective in nature, it is subjective in nature, and it is influenced by opinions, by emotions, more than just facts and analysis. So you should have an understanding of the style and tone of the passage. So these are basically, if you see all of this, okay, none of this is basically understanding the technical jargon, it's not understanding like scientific phenomenon, it's not understanding the details, but mostly the subtext surrounding the particular passage. So understanding the subtext is the most important thing that you can actually do when you are answering questions for reading comprehension. That understanding of the subtext of the passage is what is tested. Now that we understand that, let's take a look at a specific type or part of reading comprehension, that is stated versus inferred ideas. So what are stated ideas, what are inferred ideas? So if you take your passage, okay, in your passage, you can split things into different parts. One is your stated conclusions, stated ideas. So your stated conclusions, where the author has explicitly said that the policy is unlikely to pass through Congress, or some conclusion that the author has arrived at and has explicitly stated in the passage. But there will be implicit ideas or implicit inferences that can be based on the same information, and which basically you can infer from the same information that is given in the passage but as not explicitly stated in the passage. So for example, in terms of in the same case, if I say that this particular policy is unlikely to pass through the passage, you can say that I can infer that there isn't bipartisan support for this particular passage, or the support for this particular policy is a minority support. So this is not explicitly stated, but you can infer from the entire phrasing or information that is given in the passage. So essentially you can have explicit parts of the passage, explicit parts as in explicitly stated, directly mentioned parts of the passage, and then there will be implicit parts of the passage which are not explicitly stated but are implicit from the information given. Another way is that you will be given facts, you will be given information as such, that would be explicitly stated in the passage. On the other hand, you will have assumptions which are implicit and not directly stated in the passage. So for example, if I say in the passage that this policy is up for review in the Congress in 2022, so that's a fact that I'm explicitly stating in the passage. If I draw the conclusion that this is unlikely to ever become a reality soon because it is unlikely to get the support in Congress, I am implicitly making the assumption that this cannot be an executive action, a governor can't sign off on it, or it's not something that the executive can do without Congress support or without the support of your legislature as such. So in all of these cases, what am I doing in this case? I'm essentially making I'm giving explicit facts, explicit conclusion, and based on those same facts, I can have other inferences that I can make. I can see the gap between the conclusions and the facts and say that to reach from the facts to the conclusions, I need the following assumptions. So there are the parts which are given in the passage, like conclusions, facts, arguments which are explicitly stated in the passage, and then there are implicit parts of the passage, that is other inferences that can be drawn from the passage, assumptions that the author has made based on the passage. So all of these are not directly stated. So in this particular case, we will take a look at two specific ideas. One is the stated ideas and one is the inferred ideas. Stated ideas are basically the main conclusions that the author has reached in the passage, that he has explicitly mentioned in the passage, and inferred ideas are basically ideas that you can use the same information that is given in the passage to come up with supporting ideas or corollaries to the ideas that are mentioned in the passage. These ideas will not be explicitly mentioned in the passage, but using the same facts you can arrive at them. Without any other extra information, you can arrive at those particular ideas. That is the difference between stated ideas and inferred ideas. Essentially, inferred ideas is most likely what you'd be tested at, but understanding the stated conclusion is also extremely important because that helps you ground all your thinking as such. Now, with that basic understanding of what is expected in reading comprehension, what are the stated parts of a reading comprehension, what are the unstated parts of a reading comprehension, we'll take a look at a small reading comprehension to test this out. So consider the following reading comprehension passage. The passage is costly signals that are honest because of the fact that they are costly are ubiquitous. Why do people give flowers to their romantic interests or take them to overpriced restaurants? Probably because these acts are costly. Were the suitor not interested in a long-term relationship, he would have little incentive to invest such effort. His gifts function not because roses are particularly useful items, but because they are a costly signal of commitment. So here basically you are given an example of a costly signal, and the issue of these costly signals is the costly signals indicates certain kind of socially desirable virtue. In this case, it's a signal of your commitment that you are giving this particular flowers or whatever you are doing. And what exactly does it do? It signals that this person can be trusted, that he is serious about the relationship. So what exactly is the author doing through the first paragraph? The author is introducing the topic of costly signals and giving an example of it, that of a suitor as such. So what has the author done through the first paragraph? Costly signals, what are they, and an example. Okay. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. Here is why this matters for virtue signaling. Dishonesty is a major problem in the moral domain. People want to appear good because it wins them friends and social status. Our moral sense evolved because people who convince others of their moral qualities reap such social benefits. But what prevents someone from pretending to be a good person, reaping all the social benefits and not following through? So here basically the author is basically saying that dishonesty is a major concern. Because what happens is that if you are projecting a aura of honesty, you reap social benefits. But if that honesty or the aura of honesty is not backed up by action, then you will be ripping off people who have essentially trusted you. So this is a real social problem, and virtue signaling has a role over here, where basically a fake virtue signaling costs society, and real virtue signaling will help society understand who can be trusted, who is honest as such. So essentially, the author has not actually given why costly signals are important for virtue signaling, but the author has given what is virtue signaling. That is our signaling to the people that somebody is honest, because that honesty is linked to social benefits. So the author in this particular paragraph introduces significance of virtue signaling from a social context. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph so that we understand how costly signals are related to the real problem of virtue signaling, which we rely on for finding out the honest, or separating the honest from the dishonest. So let's take a look at the third paragraph. Throughout human evolution, being able to discriminate true allies who stick with you no matter what, from fair weather friends who abandon you when you fall ill, could make the difference between life or death. So virtue signaling, or understanding the real signal from the fake signal, could be a matter of life or death from a social perspective as such. As such, humans are obsessed with moral hypocrisy. That is why it is so important for us to know which is real virtue signaling or fake virtue signaling, because differentiating between them could be a matter of life or death. We carefully scrutinize potential romantic partners, friends or team members for signs that they are not only in it for the money. And since, per the logic of costly signaling, the cost that people are willing to pay are a reliable signal of their commitment, we pay extra attention to these costs when we evaluate other people. So here is how virtue signaling and costly signals are connected together. So the author introduced what are costly signals and gave an example of it. Then the author introduced what is virtue signaling, and in this particular paragraph, the author is saying why virtue signals, or being able to differentiate between real virtue signals and fake virtue signals, is so important. It could be a question of life or death as such. So that is why we need the ability to differentiate between fake virtue signaling and real virtue signaling, and that is where costly signals come in, because costly signals indicate a real commitment. They are not easy to do, and that is why when you see a costly signal, you are going to evaluate more carefully, because that is more indicative of a real commitment of being a real virtue signal rather than a fake one. So basically, the importance of virtue signaling, or rather not importance of virtue signaling, but rather importance of discriminating between fake and real virtue signals, differentiating between real and fake signals, importance of differentiating between real and fake signals, and how costly signals factor into this differentiation. They essentially help you do the differentiation, because there is essentially the cost of the signal indicates that it is more likely to be a real signal rather than a fake signal, because it was difficult for the person who did that particular signal, who gave off that signal, to do. So it is an indicator of their motivation and their commitment, that they are not faking it as such. So costly signals factor in this differentiation. Importance of differentiating between fake and real signals, and how costly signals factor in this differentiation. So if you think of it overall, what is the point of this passage? The overall point of this passage is that virtue signaling, or understanding what are the real signals versus the fake signals and differentiating between this, is extremely important from a social perspective, and that is where costly signals come in. Costly signals, because they what underlies the costly signal is a commitment of resources. They indicate that the person who is giving off that signal is giving a real signal, not a fake signal. So essentially, this is a analysis of costly signaling and how these are important when you are evaluating the signals that you are in a social context as such. So now that you understand, okay, this is about virtue signaling, how signaling between the fake, how differentiating between real and fake signals is important, and once you understand that this is important, how costly signals factor into this differentiation, because those who are evaluating it will know that a costly signal is more likely to be a real signal than a fake signal, because it requires a commitment, etc. to actually, it's a reliable signal of their commitment, and that's why people actually give more importance to those costly signals than just signals which bear no cost to it. So then you will feel that this is not a reliable signal. A costly signal is a more reliable signal, that it's a real signal. Okay, so now that you understand the passage as such, let's take a look at the questions. So the first question is that the primary purpose of the passage is to, what is the passage doing? So this is basically looking at the explicit or stated idea of the passage. What is the author trying to say through the passage? So here he's trying to say that costly signals are more reliable signals, and when somebody is discriminating between fake and real signals, they are more likely to trust costly signals. So now that we understand the point of the passage, let's take a look at the options. Generally, whenever I take a look at the options, out of the 5 options, 3 generally I discard immediately because they do not fit with my existing idea of the answer. So consider the present of dishonest virtue signaling, wherein individuals reap social benefits by pretending not to be good. But that is a very small part of the passage. The passage is mostly about costly signals, how costly signals are a reliable source in virtue signaling, and how they help people who are evaluate the whether or not a particular signal is real or fake. So again, this particular option, which focuses on dishonest virtue signaling, is missing most of the point. So let's take a look at the second option. Challenge the conventional notion regarding the significance of virtue signaling in social interactions. See, the author is not doing that at all. The author is in fact confirming the value of virtue signaling. The author has said, in fact, that virtue signaling could be or being able to differentiate between a real signal and a fake signal could be the difference between life and death. So the author is not saying that the significance of virtue signaling in social interactions is low, or he's not challenging the conventional notion. Not at all. He's actually confirming it. So I can remove this immediately. Examine the role of virtue signaling in the process of discriminating true allies from fair weather friends. Now, till the first part, it is true. The rule, it's not just the role of virtue signaling, but the role of costly signals in discriminating good signals from bad signals in the process of virtue signaling, or differentiating in the process of virtue signaling. So firstly, it is missing the important part of costly signals, and it's not just about true allies versus fair weather friends, but it is applicable for any social interaction. That is a romantic partner, any social interaction, you need to evaluate costly signals, and you tend to consider those costly signals as real reliable signals. So again, this is missing most of that, so I can eliminate that. Explain the prevalence of costly signals in social interactions as a result of their inherent value in evaluating other people. This is very important. Why are costly signals used? Because they are reliable. People who are evaluating your signals, whether it's a real signal or a fake signal, can trust a costly signal more because there is a commitment of time and resources behind a costly signal. So this is essentially combining both parts, costly signal and virtue signaling, and the role of costly signals in virtue signaling. So this gets the entire passage or the whole heart of the passage right. So D would be the right answer in this case. We'll take a look at E also. Argue that costly signals enable us to notice moral hypocrisy and avoid dishonest individuals. Costly signals are a positive indicator. The absence of costly signals is an indicator that probably this person is a hypocrite and probably dishonest. But the presence of costly signals will not prove the dishonesty or moral hypocrisy. The presence would actually prove that this person is reliable. The absence might indicate that, okay, maybe we can't trust this person, but it would not prove moral hypocrisy or dishonesty also. So again, this is not the role as given in the passage, so E also can be eliminated. So clearly, once we had an idea of what is being discussed, we could easily answer and find the answer to be option D. Now let's take a look at the next question. So in this case, this was a stated idea, the role of costly signals in virtue signaling. This is a stated idea over here, where they are basically the last part, signal as per the logic of costly signaling, the cost that people are willing to pay is a reliable signal of commitment. And when we are evaluating people, this is what we do. We evaluate how many costly signals they are sending, what kind of costly signals they are sending. So this is a stated idea, and you should be able to get this because it is something that is given in the passage. It's one of the last concluding lines of the passage, so it's more likely to be the place where the author is distilling down his message to give the overall message of the passage. Now let's take a look at the next question. According to the passage, costly signals hold value because which of the following? So this has also been explicitly stated. This is the supporting idea. Why are costly signals valuable? Because they are a costly signal of commitment. Again, why are they valuable? Humans are the logic of cost, the cost that people are willing to pay are a reliable signal of their commitment. So at two places the author has explicitly stated that costly signals indicate that you are able to sacrifice or pay a particular cost to signal your commitment for a social benefit. So costly signals are essentially a indicator of you ready to pay your cost or pay a cost to signal your commitment. So they are reliable signals because of the fact that they indicate a person's commitment to secure a social benefit. Okay. Costly signal helps us sharpen our moral sense. It does no such thing. It is a signal. It is not a evaluating faculty as such. So we can eliminate this directly. Costly signals are reliable indicators of commitment and thus expedite moral evaluation. Exactly right. Because you have costly signals, you can say that yes, this person is more reliable, more trustworthy. He has put in resources and time in doing this. Costly signals showcase our readiness to invest efforts in social relationships. But it's not just social relationships. It is almost a romantic relationship also. Any kind of social interaction, a costly signal would help the person who is evaluate you as a social person that they have to interact with. So it's not just readiness, it's commitment. So on both counts, I would say that C is not a apt way of expressing what is actually given in the passage. Costly signals are necessary to identify honest individuals during social interactions. They are not necessary, they help in evaluation. So if there are costly signals, you can say that yes, this is a reliable indicator of this person's commitment, and that will help you evaluate, but that is not absolutely necessary as such. In the absence of costly signals also you can evaluate, but it would make your job much harder to discriminate the dishonest from the honest. So again, this is a distortion of what is actually given in the passage. Costly signals enable us to scrutinize potential romantic partners, friends, or team. But it does not explain it. This is true, but it does not explain why it holds value. According to passage, costly signals hold value because not because that they help us discriminate, but because they are a indicator of being a good signal. That they are indicator that the person who is giving out the signal is a honest person. So this misses that point. So between them, between E and B, E just gives you the result without telling you why. B tells you why it's a good signal. Why does it hold value? So the right answer would be option B. Let us take a look at the last question. Which of the following most clearly represents an example of a costly signal as described in the first paragraph? So this is now you are taking a look at examples which are outside of the passage. So this is an example of the application type of questions that we discussed. That is taking the like the reasoning and logic given in the passage and applying it to outside information that is outside of the passage. So what was given as an example of costly signal? The roses were given. So roses essentially meant that you spent money to indicate your commitment of time or effort or to a particular person. So essentially there's a cost associated which indicates your commitment, and that helps you secure a benefit. So there has to be a cost benefit trade-off. You agree to pay a cost now to signal your commitment or signal your eagerness to achieve a particular benefit. Okay, so let us take a look at the options. A peacock endangering its survivability to grow an extravagant tail to attract mates. So basically what is the cost over here? The cost is of your lessened survivability and the benefit is finding mates. So you are paying a cost now to indicate your commitment to the goal so that you can reap the social benefit of finding better mates or finding more mates. So essentially A is that same cost benefit kind of trade-off as is given in the passage as such. So I would say this is definitely an example of a costly signal. This is something that indicates that the peacock is ready to sacrifice now, give up something now, pay a cost now to indicate his commitment to a particular goal as such. An employer paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to a graduate from premium business schools. Now, even though this is true, that this is a cost that the author is paying, that the employer is paying, it does not really indicate a sacrifice for a benefit as such. So it's not as if the employer is paying hundreds and thousands of dollars to signal that they are a good employer. They are basically hiring for their own benefit as such. So it's not essentially there has to be a selflessness to the cost that is paid, so that that selflessness is an indicator. Here there is no selflessness that is indicated. The peacock endangering its survivability to send out a signal is a selfless action. Paying somebody a top dollar for the job is not a selfless action. It's a fairly selfish action where you are making sure that you get the top talent so that you earn more money. So it isn't exactly the same as such. So for that I can remove option B. A politician promising to support a specific cause or a group to win the upcoming elections. This is not a trade-off at all. A politician, you can make as many promises as possible. There is no cost attached to promises. So since this does not even have a cost attached to it, I would directly remove this as an option. A snake molting its skin intermittently to improve mobility and health. Again, this is a fairly selfish action. You're doing it in self-interest. There is no self versus other trade-off going on over here. Cost to self for a benefit to other kind of trade-off going over here at all. So again, this can be eliminated immediately. An athlete losing weight to get selected for the national team. Again, there's a cost, but it's a personal cost and a personal advantage. There is no signaling involved over here. So directly I can eliminate option E. Only A has that kind of signaling, this where there's cost to self to indicate and a benefit to others, to indicate your commitment to others to a social goal as such. Only A actually is an example of that. So A would be the right answer. So this is basically what you should keep in mind when you are solving reading comprehension questions. Figure out what is a stated idea, what is an inferred idea, and what is given in the passage, and find out and understand what is not explicitly stated in the passage but can be inferred from the passage as such. So this is basically how you should approach and answer questions from reading comprehension. This is your first example. We'll be continuing on this path. So thank you for tuning in.